thanks so much for joining me. It's great to have you on this series. And, I've tracked your journey closely. So I'm going to start by asking you to pin it down to the 2-3 milestones that brought you here.
Well, I think honestly, the biggest milestone of this journey over the last 20 years has been the fact that I got into healthcare by accident, but it turned out to be a calling and a passion that I never had imagined myself. I think 20 years ago when we were in college, you never thought of healthcare as a profession outside of being a doctor or a nurse. So Dad decided to get into the space. He'd got a kind of a skeleton put together. And by default, I got in. And very soon after I did, I kind of realized that it was actually something that I really liked to be. And doing something that you believe in, that you're passionate about, changes your whole life, to my mind. If I look back the last 15, 20 years, and I have done that often with my teams, I actually don't think I have a different skill set than anybody else on the table. I think what differentiates my skill set on the table is the fact that I truly believe and love what I do. And that brings you skill sets and capabilities that you probably don't have or wouldn't have in the normal case. So I think that was a defining moment, is landing up in a place and realizing that it was the right place to be. And after that, everything kind of follows.
When you look at the general view is that you got it easy, but I know you didn't. You really worked hard, and you cut your teeth really working on the ground and upwards, working in hospitals. What were the initial years like?
Well, I think in some ways it's very easy, but I think that easy actually is very difficult. One, because of the kind of background that you have, people expect that you're going to get it any which way, etc. And I think the only easy you get with that is the fact that you have access to some of the best institutions from education and other points. So you still have to work at it, but you at least get there. People who probably have better marks than me may not get there because of financials or otherwise, or advice, which is also very, very valuable, at least in the pre-Google era, in that sense. So that sense, obviously that's easy. You have the comfort of capital behind you. But I think the difficult part is of being a startup or a new sector or industry alongside a giant family business that's coming down generations, and everybody's kind of, awed by it and so on and so forth. And there you're setting up doing something which is uncharted territory. Healthcare 20 years ago was not seen as a business idea in itself. It was largely charitable hospitals. And then you try to make a venture out of it where nobody's interested because they're too busy looking at the big kid. And in that transition, Dad passed away. They're obviously focused meant to preserve than to grow. And I think that sense it became more difficult than a normal startup would have been. So it's actually worked against you in the beginning. But the fact that you're ignored, and the fact that there are people busy doing other more important things actually is what got us here. The fact that this got built up in a steam and gathered steam because nobody else was kind of, not too many pairs of eyes were kind of watching what you do. So you had the ability to make your mistakes and take your calls, right or wrong, but do it your way. And I think that's really what has helped. So it's been easy, but that easy can become really difficult at some point.
So your dad was a pioneer in the pharmaceutical space. I mean, and you've done it in the healthcare space, because when you started Fortis and the expansion, pre-expansion, it was the first generation of those privately, set up and high technology oriented hospital chains.
Clearly it's first corporate hospital.
Yeah, first corporate hospital. So it was a real startup in that context. But you've seen that entire area completely, grow rapidly, and now the demand is, huge. And I know you guys are just pacing yourself to catch up with it. How has it really changed the entire healthcare industry?
I think when we started, healthcare was, a lot of it was charitable, a lot of it was mom and pop shops at a smaller level, and if it was private, it was largely doctor run, doctor owned, 1-2 odd setups. I think the idea of a corporate hospital with things like management and systems was a bit odd. And it's odd also because of the kind of crop that you're getting, because you're still hiring from within the industry, whether it's physicians or nurses or the odd thing called management, which didn't really exist. And therefore, when you start talking about these things, it's like, okay, what the hell are these guys talking about? So I think if you look back 15 years to now, I think that shock has gone. Because now it's become an industry, in the sense there are tons of these guys, more mushrooming, different models, etc. But that's become the norm. Having done that, the crop really hasn't changed. The sourcing of talent is coming from the same places. The education of that talent is happening the same way. So if I turn around and say that from 20 years to today, has medical education accepted and changed for the doctors to understand this world? Probably not. And if it has, it's in pockets. So you're getting the same crop as you got 20 years ago. The shock is gone, but you still have to go and do reskilling and so on and so forth to explain why it is important to do it in the manner and way that we do. And healthcare talent per se, healthcare management talent per se is not something which is big in this country and is not looked at as an option. If you go and ask a guy in MBA, and you want to join iBanking, you want to join this, that, and the other, you want to join hospital, like, what are you talking about? So it's not been, you don't have training for it, and it's not the most hottest sectors, and therefore skill is a challenge across the board.
So that brings me to the next question. What are the skill gaps that you see as this segment really booms? Because it requires even more administrative and management skills than many other industries. So and also some bit of technical expertise. So what is the right fit, and where do you see the biggest talent gap?
So I think if you look at the sector across the country, we are 1 bed to 1,000. We are 0.7 doctors to 1,000 population. WHO expects you to be 3 beds to 1,000 for a country, 3.3 to 1,000 as a country, and 3 beds to 1,000 for a doctor. The same thing applies to nurses, technicians, So as a quantity first, we are completely underskilled as a nation. We don't have the infrastructure, and we don't have the skill sets across, whether it's doctor, nurse, tech, management, officer, whatever you want to look at it. Then you add the quality angle to it, and we are completely underskilled from a quality perspective as well. And again, through the value chain. I say this with the caveat that we have some of the best physicians in the world created out of India, in India and abroad. We have some of the best and most dedicated nurses across the world who are Indian trained and stuff. But overall, the quality skill topped with the quantity skill set is completely inadequate. There are, surprisingly, in a healthcare institution, you almost have every single profession. It's not just doctors and nurses, which is what comes to mind when you think of a hospital, but you have engineers, you have architects, you have lawyers, because legal is a big part of an organization and a hospital. So you actually occupy and serve all professions to come into this place. I mean, if our engineering does not do what it does, we cannot treat, because we'll have full of infections and all sorts of stuff. It'll be inefficient. When we needed to go down to 16 degrees to do a heart transplant, we'll have probably 25 degrees and so on. So you need a lot of skill sets that are completely back-end to deliver the service that we like to deliver. So your industry as such actually takes every single field as an intake. The training specifically for this sector is absent in most sectors. The training and the courses of this sector, doctors, nurses, techs, is certainly not up to the mark of what Indian healthcare is heading towards, because that curriculum and training hasn't kind of moved up. So it's like, the engineering colleges and the Infosys and the TCS, how they used to have that problem, and then they started doing their own thing as a bridge or whatever the case is. We're in that bit of this thing, but we're not big enough. And obviously healthcare is cheap in India, so it doesn't have the dollars enough to actually turn around and say, okay, I'll do a 3-year degree and do it myself, because that's a huge responsibility that you probably can't just do it at the back of your house kind of a thing. So I think skill from a quantity, from a quality, and from the current need. I mean, if you look at what the consumer is looking for, he's looking for the clinical best, he's looking for the best talent, the best tech, the best technology in terms of interface, and the best kind of service. And even if you think of something which is easy for us to do, service, because we are great in hospitality, we have a lot of institutions in hospitality, and it is a DNA of India to be hospital. Nobody wants to join a hospital to do hospitality. They'd rather join a hotel or an airline. So you're bottom of the food chain in many professions, and you're not skilled for that profession as it is.
So how do you, as you're expanding rapidly with Fortis, Shivinder, how are you actually dealing with this situation? Do you have multiple training programs internally? How are you, A, attracting the young pool of talent, and B, training them?
So I think firstly, attracting, by virtue of the size that we've got to now, we have the ability to attract generically better talent. So we're actually getting interest. So the MBA would look at a Fortis or some of our other competitors versus not looking at us at all 10 years ago. So you're generally getting a better crop. Obviously, training is critical. I mean, no institution, whether it's a healthcare or otherwise, can do without training. But I think for us, the most important is actually being here and getting trained on the shop floor and on the job training and so on and so forth. So whatever training we might do, we circulate a lot of what we can circulate. So clinicians is easier because at least the core clinical set they've come trained with, wherever they come from, whether it's from directly from the educational institutions or from other facilities. It's all the other aspects of training, which is services and systems and so on and so forth, or other professions, as in management and administrative professions that you need to train. And then movement is probably the safest way for that. So you set up a new hospital, if you can take 20% of your existing crop there, it's far better and much early success than doing net new all over again and training them all, because you'll never get that DNA. So it's a bit like making curd, you take the bit of yogurt and put it there, and therefore that then becomes the new yogurt and has a bit of a consistency.
Yeah. UpGrad is looking at online education. Do you think there could be an online solution to a lot of this training needs, and what can be done in that?
Completely. I think firstly online is where the future is going, and education is surprisingly taking it much faster than many other sectors. Healthcare is far behind in that sense. But generically skilling, upgrading, whatever the case is, online will certainly be a very, very significant solution, and things that UpGrad is doing will certainly be very relevant to the healthcare sector as well. Whether it's basic course, there'll be tons of physicians who will be graduating from medical colleges that won't know how to read an ECG. You really can't do much if you haven't read an ECG or read an X-ray properly. That's like 101 for healthcare. And maybe they did it in their third year and it wasn't in application until 5 years after, whatever the reason is. But when you actually get to the shop floor, if you don't have that skill set, so if you have UpGrad kind of online training modules or self-help kind of stuff, I think it's from the clinical technical fields to the administrative management field, very much so.
Data is also changing the way you are looking at healthcare or adding a new angle to healthcare. What is the data analytics that goes into a place like this, and how important is technology in that context of really being able to access a lot of data?
Well, technology per se and data specifically is going to be what is going to change healthcare in the future. If you look at, say, 50 years of healthcare, what happened in the first 30 probably got replicated in the next 10. What's happened in the last 5 is probably taken over the 50. That's happened on a tech platform. Because of all the tech that's got together, today you have, so a facility like this would have all its major equipment online, sending data to its source. So whether we bought it from GE or Philips or Siemens or anybody like that, data will be going live streaming to their source. They'll know exactly the uptime of the machine, the quality, the calibration. Today, that kind of stuff is a done deal. The ability for that machine to do it much better, much faster, and respond to you in a much more urgent manner, and therefore the efficiency of it, all of that is tech-based. But going forward, the tech that's going to change healthcare is not going to be health tech. It's going to be tech. It's going to be how technology is used to deliver healthcare to a citizen, whether it is to keep you healthy or to get you healthy as if you fall sick, critical health or or a chronic or whatever the case is. And data plays a very critical role, one, because of maintenance, because even though we talk about averages and say that 72 is the right pulse rate and all that, 72 is an aggregate of a bunch of data points across the universe of people, but it's not necessarily the right number. It is a range, but it may be a right number for you. Similarly, your blood pressure versus mine and so on, it doesn't have to be necessarily 120, 80 and stuff like that. But data over time collected seamlessly through devices or through other means will eventually become personalized and universal health applied to you in a lot more critical manner. So I think if you look at technology, if you look at data, they'll eventually work hand in hand to deliver better and hopefully predictive and preventive healthcare than just curative healthcare, which is what we do.
As an entrepreneur, how are you looking at this entire tech-driven healthcare products, apps, etc.? Because there's a huge focus on that, and I've been meeting a lot of private equity and VC guys, and they're saying that the next phase of growth is going to be there. And India is very well placed because we have the ecosystem in place.
So my first answer is we're not looking at as much as we should. And if I wear my Fortis hat, I can understand why. because running an organization is a 120% job. So it's not like you have the ability to say, okay, I'm going to spend 2 days of my week and look at how I'm going to impact, etc. Secondly, there are lots of initiatives going on here to actually incubate tech into the way you do things. And some of it is slow because the market pushes, you respond faster.
Sure.
But when the market is not pushing, when the market today is such a huge demand-supply gap, people are just trying to cope. So they're saying, why are we doing all this stuff? But I think the market is going to start asking for a lot more going forward than it is doing today, and that will make this thing happen. But I think there are enough projects even going on today as we speak that are looking at how do we get tech to solve problems or make it faster, better, cheaper, and so on and so forth. I think as a group solution, if I put my group hat on, we're actually looking at tech in the healthcare space, whether it's data or devices and other things, to see how we can actually work with and incubate those kind of organizations to actually work with us. Sure. So get different angles of the group working together, whether it's through partnering with them or investing in them or setting them up, which will eventually make it easier for Fortis to deliver its objective of delivering good quality healthcare. So it may not necessarily all happen here because it may not sound right for a Fortis board or its shareholders say, okay, I'm now going to start investing in devices, because that's not our business. Our business is services. But if the part of the ecosystem can work with Fortis to set up a device that works for its patients, it's something that's doable. So I think there are different layers of what's going on. But if you ask me, I'd love to do more and put more time in that space, because that will deliver better solutions to here than my time that I'm using today.
Fair enough. Tell me something. One additional question on the skilling piece before I move on to your mentors or inspiration, etc. And that is how important in the scheme of things is to constantly upgrade yourself in terms of skill sets. Whichever part of the hospital chain that you are in, be it doctors, be it and what is the role of continuous education in something like that?
I miss it personally. I've done an MBA, I've done a maths degree and so on and so forth. But when you start experiencing the things that you've learned theoretically in a school environment, in your world, it could be a big gap. And you don't necessarily remember everything. I learned accounting, I joined operations, and I spent many years in operations and projects before I started actually being a serious CEO, looking at balance sheets and cash flows. But by the time you get there, you've probably forgotten your 101 and 102 a long time ago. And there's no way you can go and access it. I'm not going to go back and start reading books. It just sounds retard. But if it was a quick, my quick dummy guide to a balance sheet or a cash flow or any of the other stuff, it would really make it much simpler even for people like myself. I want to know what an ECG is. I don't have to be an expert or be able to read one, but I need to know what an ECG does to my customer and why does a doctor need to do it at what time. I need to understand that. Now today, after 20 years, we probably do understand it. But if I tell my new EA who's joined last month that, buddy, you better figure out what an ECG and this, that, and what is a Q wave and so on, he's going to say, you don't hire me as a doctor. I don't want you to be a doctor. But can you figure it out in a 2-minute clip or a 5-minute this thing and figure out the 5 most important diagnoses? Yes, I think many of us need to know that as an organization. So I think we encounter many such situations where we need to be, 30,000 feet knowledgeable about it, not necessarily on the ground level. And we don't have the ability, rather than going asking somebody, which is a lot of people don't do. So I think continuous skilling or upgradation of your skill sets, even if you know the subject very well, because the world is changing too fast today. I learned computers on DOS and stuff like that. If I was to just go by that trajectory, I'd probably be unskilled today. So you need to continue to learn and stuff like that. And people coming into the workforce today that are much smarter than you. And you can't be their boss if you don't know what the hell they're talking about. And you are at a loss today with the next generation in a lot of ways. And there's no way you can actually go to him and say, listen, I'm your boss, but you teach me. And we've done that. We've done reverse mentoring and stuff as an organization, because you realize the youth today, it's ballooning and bursting in some ways. But if it is done in a more private, in a more secure platform, where I don't have to share my weakness or my black holes or blind spots, it's certainly be much more valuable.
And online allows all of that access. Looking back, I know this journey is a continuous process, and there's a lot of learning ahead. But what are the 2-3 things that have held you in good stead, Shivinder, when you have walk the path of success? What are the 2-3 things that you think helped you?
Well, I'll categorize it for within my workspace. I think the fact that we deal with healthcare, we deal with patients, and we deal with life at the end of the day, because decisions we take could lead to this way or that way. So I said, do you want your patient going back home horizontal or vertical? Mm-hmm. And our objective is the fact the guy walks back and not on a stretcher. So therefore, in our case, I think what has helped for us, or at least for me personally, is that what's in the best interest of our patient. Because if I'm able to do right by him, everything else kind of falls into line, and that needs to become the core. If everything that you do, you look at it, if I do this, is it going to help him or make it worse? And it's clinical, it's efficient, it's comfort, and it's financial. Because at the end of the day, you can get the guy and give him a bypass, but if you give him the bed and he gets another heart attack, it doesn't serve the purpose. So I think looking at patient as the mirror is pretty much, I think, the biggest scanner that one can use. I think secondly, and I think this depends on who you are, but at least from my perspective, is trusting your gut. And there are many, many times that you kind of don't have that confidence to say that what you're thinking is the right thing to do, or there's a crowdsourcing view that is kind of looking as the right way to go, and everybody believes it, and you don't know how to kind of hold that view, and you let go, and then later you always land up cursing it. I would rather today trust my gut and get it wrong than to have not trusted it and then curse it later on, saying I knew it but I should have done it differently.
So that brings me to the next question. What is the one mistake that you've learned from? What is the mistake, and looking back, what are the learnings from that?
Well, I think there are many situations where you get into a position of conflict. You have to choose between what's right or what your organization would benefit, or what you've been told to do, and so on and so forth. And those crossroads, you need to have crystal clarity. I mean, you cannot do right by your patient and the organization and what you've been told, and it doesn't always fit, because it's not an ideal world. And I think when you get to those positions, if you're not able to kind of take a more well-structured call, it always haunts you. And there have been many situations of that nature. And I think in some ways it goes back to the gut. So in places like that, you at some point you have to turn around and say, listen, this is the way it's going to be. Whether you like it or you don't, and if it's going to hurt me in the short term, doesn't matter. But
so you're saying that mistakes do happen, but you live with it and you learn from it.
Yeah, and in our business, it's not easy to live with them, because a small mistake of yours could lead to life of somebody's. So you need to kind of be able to figure that out much faster than just any other business. Because at the end of the day, the business for most other sectors will be a financial call. And I mean, having worked in healthcare, I think that's an easy one to do. So in the other business that we have, and sometimes when you're really tied up and people ask for time and they're hounding you, my response many times has been, is somebody going to die if I take this tomorrow? Because in this case, if you don't do it, somebody might actually just... So you kind of start putting very stark black and white situations to you, and it actually helps, because sometimes you just need to know that this is either going to keep somebody alive or not. And I think that's a very, very big responsibility.
Sure. What's the biggest... the proudest moment that you've had? You've had many successes, but the one thing that you think was a turning point where you think you still remember it with a lot of cheer?
Well, I don't know. Proudest moment would probably fit the right bill, but I mean, I've had eons of moments where I've felt on top of the world, whether it was diagnosing patients who have come to us with virtually no chance of being diagnosed, or getting people back alive who come with a 12 heart rate, and you feel that all this effort that you've done is worth it. So whether it's our first hospital succeeding, which everybody had told us is going to kaput, to starting off new models of women's healthcare, or getting Escorts, which was the premier cardiac institution, and I mean that was our mecca as what we wanted to become, and actually having it in your own organization, to setting up FMRI. I mean, Fortis Gurgaon is in a lot of ways the mecca of healthcare, and actually being part of that whole creation and the vision of it, and it actually coming to fruition and working, and actually helping the consumer in the way that it does. There have been tons of moments I would turn around and say the same way. I think the whole Fortis journey to me has been more of a movement than a job. It's a movement of actually getting better quality healthcare at an affordable price to a common man who was otherwise going all over the place, either to the right place, but was overflowing in government and other facilities, or just not getting the kind of humane treatment, even though the clinical treatment was fine, or going abroad. I think we converge those situations into an organization that people can get good quality, respectable healthcare. And respect in healthcare doesn't necessarily happen, though it should. If you go to a government institution, in many cases, you actually feel vulnerable, even though you get the clinical best, perhaps. So I think all of that. So if I had to look at pride, I would say one word would be Fortis. I think Fortis is a pride moment for us.
Well put. I want to ask you a question in two parts, and this is my final question. The first is that what is your advice to youngsters who really have the ambition to do well and they want to get into healthcare? What is your piece of advice to them?
Well, I think before the healthcare piece, I think my advice to youngsters is really find and follow your passion. If people, work where they turn on and enjoy their Friday because the work week is over and they hate their Monday with the work week starting, that's not a life to live. That's a life wasted to my mind. You want to get up on Monday and saying, man, I'm going to go to work today because it's the place that I like to do. I think, I don't know the quote exactly, but I think Freud said that there are two things in life that you must love. You must love the person you live with, and you must love what you do. And if you got 50% of that right, it's not good enough. So you need to get both that right. And maybe the life partner is a bit of a gamble, but work doesn't have to be, and you can change it, unlike the life partner. So I would really say follow your passion and do what you love, because today India has so much opportunity that you can actually do that. You couldn't probably do it 30, 40 years ago. Our parents' generation probably didn't have the choice. They said, be a doctor, be an engineer, be an army officer, and that was it. Today, you can switch mid-career, you can choose your career, you can go into, you can do anything. You can create your own career. So do what you love, would be my big one.
The second piece is the advice for a lot of youngsters who are taking over the reins, or at least a legacy of a family, forward. Because I think that's as important a journey, because we forget that a large part of Indian industry is family owned, and the pressure of actually following in the footsteps of somebody who's cast a long shadow is that much tougher. And you had that challenge, right? Because your father has been a legend in the pharmaceutical sector. So what is your advice to them? Because that's often a very tough one to do.
Controversial advices are good?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I tell a lot of people that don't force your children to do what you've done. If you've loved what you've done and done that all your life, why should your children do what you loved? They should do what they loved. And if there's something different, then let it be. Many times, the next generation actually starts liking what they do only because they've been grown up in the environment, and it's fine. So if they want to do it and it kind of sinks, and that's perfect. But it shouldn't be a mandate, and it shouldn't be a foreclosed idea that you have no choice but to do that. So I actually believe that the next gen must do what they have a calling for versus what your calling was. And there are many structures to do that without actually hurting your dream. You don't have to necessarily have to shut or sell. You can create enough, and we have enough management capabilities as a country today to be able to sustain my dream and not make it my child's forced dream, or whatever the case is. And we are sitting today where Malav and I have 7 children between us. And we have a few companies that hopefully, somebody will find their way somewhere or the other. But we are very clear that it's not that our 7 kids have to join the group. They have to do what we've built. They have to work in what we built, and they have to take it over. They will own it. And we will try and make sure that we are creating an organization that can self-sustain, governance and management-wise, and they can choose to join it. But it is not a mandate. So if one guy decides to become an artist, the other one wants to become a football professional or a golfer, he should have the flexibility and the encouragement from the family to do so, if that's his calling. But our expectation from our children is that whatever they do, they must be good at it. You don't want to be a football guy and playing, in Gurgaon district. That doesn't work. But if you're going to take it, then you do, and you do well in that space. But
that's interesting, because there are those who see it as a birthright also, and they don't necessarily have the skill sets to drive it, or don't have the gumption to push themselves to do it. And that's a bad place to be too, right?
Yeah. So and that birthright and get pushed is also a function of how your parents position you. And it's this kind of stuff gets ingrained from the time that you're born. We have the ability to kind of put it into the kid's DNA in such subtle ways that he grows up thinking that he has no choice. So it is to create an environment where the guy does it because he chooses to come and join his family business, not because he has to.
Great, Shivinder. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you very much.